Okay. My name is Steve Potts, and I'm a member of the United States Tennis Association Davis Cup Committee, and we have a project to develop an archive of the history of the United States to flesh out just the bare essentials of where a match was played, who played, and what the scores were. And this afternoon, I'm very pleased to have as a guest Dennis Ralston, who is one of the few U.S. players ever to both play and be captain of the U.S. team. And so, Dennis, if you would, I'd like for you to share with us a few of your most memorable moments of participation in Davis Cup.
Well, Steve, thank you for the privilege to talk about Davis Cup. It's been probably the most important thing in tennis to me, and I think most of the players that I've been around and played with and against. And I guess Davis Cup goes back to me as when I first knew about Davis Cup as a junior, and then I made the Junior Davis Cup team. And Billy Talbert, former Davis Cup great, he was our coach. And then in 1960, I was picked to be on the team after a win at Wimbledon when I was 17, and was put on the team. And my first match, remember this, I was the fourth man on the team. We played in Canada, and we played against the Canadians there, and Tut Bartson and Barry McKay and I think Butch Buchholz and Chuck McKinley were the four guys. I guess I was the fifth guy. I was the rookie. And that was my first Davis Cup match, and played in Montreal, and actually the Canadian Quebec province. And so the Hotel Chateau Frontenac, that's exactly where we played, on clay. All the Canadians there were French-speaking Canadians, and they were nuts. The crowd was nuts. So that was really my baptism into seeing a match. My actual first match that I played was against the Philippines in 1960 in Australia, in Brisbane. And I played the fourth match after we won the tie, and I played on grass against the Philippines, Raymond Dayro, I think was the guy's name. They weren't very good on grass, but I was so nervous, I made it close, I think. And after that, I played a lot as a player, and obviously the highlight was winning in Australia in 1963, playing with our team at a tough time in my life and in the life of every American when John Kennedy was assassinated right after that. And that had a profound effect on me that whole time. We played Australia in Adelaide, and I played John Newcomb in the first match and won 7-5 in the fifth. Very tight match. Then Chuck McKinley lost to Emerson in a four-set match, I think. Then we won the doubles. And then I played Emerson in the fourth match and lost in 4 sets. Didn't play well, and he played great. And then McKinley won, and we finally won the Davis Cup for the U.S., which was a great experience for me. I got a ticker tape parade home when I got home to Bakersfield, and after that in '63 when we won, then we ended up playing again in '64 in Cleveland, and I had a real tough loss there. I lost to Fred Stolle when the score was 2-1 for the U.S., and I lost 6-4 in the fifth. After being down 2 sets to love, I battled back and actually got up a break in the fifth and had a huge letdown. So that was a disappointing time, obviously, but a lot of exciting Davis Cup matches in Mexico with my roommate at SC, Rafael Osuna. Played against him, and we battled in Mexico City. We battled in Cleveland. We battled in Los Angeles. 1966, my last Davis Cup match, I'll remember this, maybe played the best match I've ever played. We ended up losing to Brazil. And in my Davis Cup career, I made a lot of those countries happy by giving them some victories, losing to them. But I lost to a guy named Edison Mandarino, and I played as well as I could play on clay. I was up 2 sets to 1, and the score was 2-all, 2 matches all. The crowd was going nuts. There were 8,000 of them screaming "Brazil, Brazil!" And it was a real experience, to say the least, and disappointing. And then I turned pro in '66, and so I figured my Davis Cup career was basically over. 1968, Donald Dell asked me to be the coach of the Davis Cup team. So I served as the coach from 1968 through 1971, and we won every time. We had a great team with Arthur and Stan Smith and Bob Lutz and Eric Van Dillen and Tom Gorman, guys like that. We had a great run there. Then in 1972, contrary to some people's beliefs, I was appointed captain to be the captain of the American team. And as a captain, that win in 1972 probably was the most satisfying, probably the most difficult time in the Davis Cup that I've ever been involved with, either as a player or as a coach. And we played every match outside the United States. Didn't play one home match. We ended up playing the final against Romania in Bucharest in 1972, like October. And prior to that match, the Australians had lost to Romania in the semifinals right before the U.S. Nationals, and we got back over here in New York, and they were saying, you know, don't even go. There's no chance. You can't win. They'll cheat you. They'll do anything they can to win. And we had given away our right to play in the U.S. We were supposed to play the final in the U.S., and for some unknown reason to any of us, we ended up going to Romania. So we weren't really looking forward to that trip. And when we got there, we knew it was exactly like what the Australians had said. The first match, Stan Smith beat Nastasi in 3 straight sets. Nastasi didn't play well. Stan played great. So we're up 1-0, and going into that match, I was hoping we'd be up 5. You know, if we could end the day split, tied 1-1, then I'd be happy. Well, after Nastasi had lost to Smith, the next match was Tom Gorman and Ian Tiriac, and that's the match I figured to win. I figured Nastasi was favored over Smith on clay in Romania. Well, Gorman gets up 2 sets to love, and then the cheating started, the stalling, the tactics. It was the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen in my life in sports. It was just phenomenal what they did and how they got away with it. Well, Gorman ends up losing in 5 sets, and our team is basically devastated. I've been out there for about 8 to 10 hours on the court, so we go into our hotel and we're sitting there, and it was right after that we just kind of talked about things. Half the team wanted to default and protest and just say there's no way we're going to win here. The press has got to understand this is not right. Anyway, we decided to play. Harold Solomon, who was on the team, decided to, he spoke up, and obviously there was no way I was going to not let us play, but Harold said, no, we got to go out and show these guys. And I think we had maybe 25 Americans there and about 8,000 Romanians. And so we went out to play the doubles, and Eric Van Dillen, who played with Stan in the doubles, was very volatile. We had a very young team. We had Eddie Dibbs and Harold and Brian Gottfried, and that was the time that the Black September had the massacre at the Olympics, and they had issued a threat to the American team in Bucharest. We had heard from our Secret Service that the Black September was going to try to do something to the American team because we had 2 Jewish members, Brian Gottfried and Harold Solomon. So we were under strict security. We never went to the courts the same way once. We took a different route. We were in armored cars. We had bodyguards. The whole 14th floor of the hotel was, everybody was moved out. They double bolted the emergency exits above and below so no one could get in. We had closed circuit television 24 hours a day. Guys were traveling with us with guns and knives. And for a while the guys thought it was kind of funny, it was kind of humorous, but it got to be pretty scary there for a while. Anyway, so we're going in, it scores 1-1, and Van Dillen, who was very young at the time, the year before had been embarrassed by Tiriac in Charlotte in the Davis Cup. He made a fool of him in the doubles. And so Van Dillen had told me that he used to have this reoccurring dream. He just couldn't stand Tiriac. He just hated him. He thought he was just evil. And so he said, I have this dream where I'm playing Tiriac, and he comes up to the net, and he says something to me, and I take my racket, and I go, whoosh, and his head goes rolling off to the court. And I'm thinking, and Van Dillen in this meeting is so volatile. Gorman has just been cheated out of the match, and by Tiriac, and Van Dillen's talking loudly and excited, and I really seriously considered not playing Van Dillen in the doubles. and I thought a lot about it. Anyway, I decided to go with established team. Well, Van Dillen played the match of his life. Didn't miss a ball. We killed him in about an hour and 10 minutes. So we're up 2-1. So we go into the final day, and the score's 2-1. And the setup is that Gorman plays Nastasi the 5th match. Stan to play Tiriac in the 4th. Well, Gorman had lost 17 straight times to Nastasi. So I knew if we got to the 5th match, we were in deep trouble. So we go to the match, and Stan wins the first set. Tiriac wins the second. Pulling tricks, they're cheating. We found out that the Romanian team every morning would have a meeting. The Romanian linesman team, would have a meeting every morning about how to go around the signals and how they were going to work the cheating. And one of the Romanians defected to the U.S. a few years later and told Stan about this, and yeah, they'd have a meeting every morning. And so they were working their magic, they were cheating and all this stuff. Anyway, it gets to 4-5, Tiriac serving in the 3rd set point for Stan. And the way they would cheat was pretty unique. It was on clay, so Tiriac served the first serve, and Stan hit the return, didn't even play it, the serve was out this far. So he hits the return, it's going down the line, there's no call from the service linesman. He's on the close sideline to the official referee, Enrique Morea. And Morea is sitting right there, and everybody's sitting right there, so the ball lands this far in on the baseline. About the time the ball landed in, the service linesman called it fault. So it was a huge delay, huge commotion, and they ended up giving Tiriac 2 serves. And he double faulted away the set, which gave us a 2-1 lead. Well, Morea, the day of the last match, this is also gospel truth. Morea came up to me and he said, Dennis, he said, I've changed so many calls that I'm not going to change anymore today. I can't change anymore. He said, and I said, Enrique, what's your job? That you're the official referee. You're supposed to make the changes. And he said, I can't. But he says, I promise you this, if you lose, I will take Tiriac out behind the barracks out there and I'll pound him into the ground. And I said, gee, thanks a lot, Ricky. And Enrique Morea is a great gentleman and a wonderful man. And he did make a lot of changes the first day. In fact, after the first day, he had 6 bodyguards with him at his hotel. And so I knew they weren't going to change many calls. Well, this one, on that set point, it was so obvious. I mean, the ball Stan's return was in, because when sometimes you play a false serve, you play your best return. Well, anyway, we're up 2-1. We go into the locker room, and Stan is just exhausted. He has no strength left, and he says, I don't know what to do. He says, every time I serve to the ad side, in the corner, or anywhere near the corner, they call it out. I said, well, serve down the middle, and don't serve there anymore. So he ended up playing the last 2 sets, not serving to the backhand corner on the ad side. And so he goes out and he loses the 4th set. Tiriac's a heck of a player anyway, and playing well. And so we get down, and I think we were this close to winning. I figured there's no way, because Stan's exhausted. And Smith gets down love 40, the first game of the 5th set on his serve. The crowd is going nuts. I mean, they're just chanting, Tiriac, Tiriac. I mean, you can't even hear yourself think. So Stan gets divine help. I swear that's what happened. I know that's what happened. He served 3 aces and 2 unreturnable serves in love 40.
Wow.
Wins the first game, and that just takes all the wind out of Tiriac, and we end up winning 6-11 in the 5th. We go off, and the security people hustle us into the car, and they say they found 2 suspicious Arab terrorist kind of looking guys in the grounds. They get us out of there. And we go back to our hotel, and we're too exhausted to even celebrate. We just want to get on the plane and get the heck out of Romania. So we get ready to leave. There's a lot of funny things that happen in Davis Cup, and this is one of them. We're all ready to go. We've been in Romania for 2 weeks, no sun, under this security. So we're scheduled to leave at 9 o'clock in the morning, Monday morning. So I get a call that night from the embassy people, and they say, the president of Romania would like to have an audience with you and the Romanian team Monday morning. And I said, well, tell the president of Romania thanks, but we're catching a plane. They said, no, you can't do that. You have to do,
You can't insult the president.
Yeah, you can't insult the president. And I said, well, it's not an insult, but we're tired, and And then I said, no. And anyway, I relented and I said, okay, well, what are we going to do about our flights? We were going to Frankfurt and then all back to the U.S. And they said, well, don't worry. You don't worry about that. We'll take care of it. So the next morning, everybody's grumbling. No one wants to go to the presidential palace and see the Ceausescu. And anyway, we go and we have this deal for an hour and a half. So we finally get to the airport at 10:30 in the morning. And this is where I really realized in those days how controlled those countries were. Ceausescu had held the plane for an hour and a half, said that plane can't leave until the American team gets there. And all the British journalists, all the foreign journalists that were going back to the free world at the time were mattered in blazes because they all missed their flights to London and everywhere. And we got on, and it was a real experience in the fact that the guy just said, that plane's not going.
Right.
You know, so we got home, and then the next year, 73, we ended up playing Australia, which maybe had the greatest team ever assembled. They had Laver, Rosewall, Newcomb, Stolle, and Fraser was the captain. And that's the year they didn't even play Rosewall in any matches at all.
That is incredible to think of Rosewall as a sub at that time.
Rosewall was a sub.
One of the peaks of his game. Right?
Yeah, and we lost the first two matches in 5 sets, which we could have won both of them. And both our guys, Gorman and Smith, played very well, but they were just too good, and we lost to them. And so that was kind of, then I made a few countries happy. We lost to Mexico when I was the captain the following year, and then we lost to Colombia, and I had a little problem getting some of the guys to play. And so I've had a lot of good wins and a lot of tough losses, but Davis Cup's been, you know, it's the ultimate thing to do to represent your country, and at any opportunity. And that's why I have a little bit of trouble today with players that saying their schedules are booked and they can't make it. I just don't think there's anything more important than if you're asked to represent your country.
Right. Dennis, thank you. Really, it's been great. One thing, let me just ask, what were the sort of financial arrangements when you were playing? Because I know we had a conversation with John Van Ryn, and he was telling us, this is back in the late 20s, that they went over to England to play, and they were taken care of as far as a place to sleep, and they had a training table, and they got $3 a day for taxis and incidentals. What was the situation during the time you played?
When I first was put on the team in 1960, I think the per diem at that time was maybe $15 a day, and they paid for the hotel. And I got all the way up in my career as a player, the expenses got up, we got up to $28 a day. That was it. And then out of the 28, we paid for all of our food, anything else we wanted to do, other than the hotel. So, you know, it wasn't, again, it was still just the fact that it was an honor to represent your country and be on the team. And of course, $28 a day in those days was a lot of money.
Actually buy a lot of hamburgers.
Yeah, it would. So I guess I was a lot better off than those guys that were in the 30s and 40s when they were getting $3. But it was still a privilege and an honor to play and be included.
Right. Well, I couldn't agree with you. Just as a spectator and a former member of the Junior Davis Cup squad, I mean, I know how thrilled I was for that, which is, you know, infinitesimal in comparison. But it really is just a special honor to play for your country. And I think as far as spectating is concerned, there's nothing like watching a hotly contested Davis Cup match. I mean, as you pointed out, where you get over there, if you're playing away and you have 10,000 screaming Romanians or Brazilians or whatever, and you've got your little small group of 50 or 60 Americans trying to support our team, it has the flavor of you know, an NFL playoff game where it's, you know, played at the home stadium of one of the teams, and, you know, all the fans are rooting for one team.
Well, it's very tough to win away from home in Davis Cup, and
right.
You really have to, if the teams are at all even, you have to be lucky. And just to recall one match where in that 72 run as the captain, we're playing Spain, and Stan Smith has 5-1. We're 2 sets to love, and he's got 5-1 in the third against Juan Gisbert. And an avid American fan, one of the 10 that were there, popped a champagne bottle at 5-1. and I heard it go off, and I said, "Who's that idiot that did that?" Because it wasn't over. Stan loses the 5-1 game, the 5-2 game, the 5-3 game, the 5-4 game, the 5-all game. And I tell you, it was like, it jinxed us. But anyway, yeah, and we won. Stan won. But had he gone to the fourth set, we would have lost because the score was tied 2-all. And so the Spanish crowd got behind Giesbert and just helped him. So it's really exciting, and it's a real special treat for us to play at home and get the home crowd behind us.
Right. Well, Dennis, listen, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to visit about Davis Cup, and this will be part of the permanent archive of the USTA's Davis Cup records, and we're certainly pleased to have all that juicy information about that about the ties that you've played in, and both as a captain and as a player. So thanks again.
Okay. Thanks.
My name is Steve Potts, and I'm a member of the Davis Cup Committee of the United States Tennis Association, and I'm very honored this afternoon to have as a guest Donald Budge, who is the only American player to win the Grand Slam. And the first. And has had probably the greatest record of any American tennis player. And we're here to talk about his participation on the United States team playing in the Davis Cup matches. And certainly I grew up as a young man hearing about one of the great matches of all times, and it was in 1937 when the United States played Germany. I believe it was played at Wimbledon, and in a deciding match, Donald Budge faced Gottfried von Kramp, who himself was a marvelous tennis player. And Don, I wonder if you would share with us your memories about that match.
Well, I'm very happy to do that. First of all, Gottfried von Kramp was my idol in tennis. He was a super sportsman. He wrote the rules on sportsmanship. No one could have been a better sport than he was. Maybe Joe DiMaggio was equal to him in his way, but Gottfried was super. The one thing that stood out in my mind with Gottfried before we get into the Davis Cup was that my first year at Wimbledon, I managed to beat Bunny Austin, who was the #2 English Davis Cup player, in the quarterfinals and got to the semis, and I was going to play Kram in the semifinal match 2 days later. So Gottfried came along when I was going to watch a match at the competitor stand, and he said, "Don, congratulations on your win against Austin today. However, I thought you were a poor sport." And you could have pulled the legs out from under me. I was flabbergasted. I couldn't think of anything I had done that was so bad. And so he grabbed my arm. He said, "Well, here, let's go over here and sit down on court 6 on the bench." And he said, "I'll tell you what you did." He said, "You remember it was a set apiece, 4-all in the third set, deuce on your serve, you came to the net, and Austin passed you down the line with a beautiful passing shot. The chalk flew up, obviously a good ball, but the linesman called it out, and he said, you deliberately served a double fault to make it even again." I said, "Yes, I remember that." He said, "Well, that was poor sportsmanship on your part." I said, "Why?" He said, "Do you realize you embarrassed that linesman in front of 15,000 people?" I said, "I wasn't concerned with the linesman, I was concerned with my opponent."
Right.
He said, "Well, Don," he said, "you and I are out there to play, we're not out there to officiate." And he said, "If a ball is called out that you hit that's in the day after tomorrow when we play, I won't throw the next point because I don't want to embarrass the linesman." So he said, he said, we miss easy balls once in a while. The linesmen miss calls, they don't try to, but they do. So he said, "I play the balls the way they're called, good, bad, or indifferent." And he said, "That's my idea of sportsmanship." So 2 days later, deuce on my serve, I came to net, he passed me with a beautiful cross-court forehand. Chalk flew up, obviously it was good, it was called out. I didn't throw the next point and won the game. So as we crossed over, Gottfried said, "Well, Don, I guess you see things my way, we'll never have another problem." So he knew he had a bad call, but he didn't expect me to throw it. But in this Davis Cup match, it was the 5th and deciding match of the tie. We were 2 matches apiece. And we were just leaving the locker room and the telephone rang, and Ellis, our locker man, was right by the phone on the wall, and he picked it up. He said, "Baron von Kramp, it's Germany calling." So Ted Tinling, the Englishman who had charge of getting us out in the court, had me on one arm and Cram on the other, tried to pull him away, and Godfrey said, wait a minute, it may be important. And the next thing we heard Godfrey say was, Ja, mein Führer.
Good heavens.
Talking to Hitler.
Right.
He wasn't a Nazi. He never believed in Nazism. But anyway, he finished the conversation, and we went out in the court. Well, now, I was ranked number 1 in the world, and Gottfried was number 2. So I had beaten him in 3 straight sets in the finals of Wimbledon 2 weeks before. So everyone expected me to win. Well, I played equally as well in the Davis Cup match, but I lost the first set 7-5 and the second set 8-6, and I'm now down 2 sets to love. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm letting my country down. I'm losing to a fellow that I can't be ashamed of losing to because he was playing beautifully. Won the 3rd set, went in for the rest period, 10 minutes to change clothes and put on dry clothes. Won the 4th set 6-3, I think. So I was now down 4-1 in the 5th set, and it looked like, I was only 1 service break, but down 4-1. It looked like he was going to win it, but I managed to win my serve to make it 2-4. So at 4-2 at Cram serving in the 5th set, I said, I've got to do something different. If he misses his first serve, I'm going to attack his second serve and go in behind, into the net behind him. And because I was getting a little bit the worst of the baseline. So fortunately for me, he missed 4 first serves by only a couple of inches. I attacked his second serve, happened to make good deep returns, and came into the net and made a winning volley, so I broke his serve at love. Now we're back on serve. So it went finally 4-all, 5-all, 6-all. And at 6-all, I broke his serve again by doing the same thing. And things just happened to work out. Luckily, I happened to make good returns off second serve. And finally, on the 5th match point, and you know, we're now playing for almost close to 4 hours.
Right.
I got my 5th match point, and I'm running for a wide ball to my forehand. And it was a sharply angled shot, so I was way past the doubles line. And as I'm running for it, I realized I had leaned too far forward and I'm going to fall down because I can't get my feet underneath me because I leaned too far forward. But I realized that I could hit the ball before I fell.
Right.
So I dived out in the court and took a swipe at the ball with my forehand. Gottfried was up at the net at this point, and I hit the ball around the post. He tried to make a volley, but the ball was past him, and it hit 6 inches inside the sideline and 6 inches inside the baseline, and that's how the match ended.
Oh my God.
So now I went up to the net after brushing all the grass off my clothes, and now here's a man who must have lost the most disappointing match of his life.
Right.
But it was so important to him for his country to win it. And he said, Don, I want to congratulate you on winning this match today against whom I like so much. And he said, now that you won, he said, I want to congratulate you because you deserve to win. And it was a marvelous match, and I hope that we get to play again. So this is how the match ended. It was quite a match, but the match ended around 9 o'clock at night, and in England it's still light at 9 o'clock. And now Gottfried and I went into the locker room. We took a shower and had a rub down, got dressed, and we came out to get our cars to take us back to our hotels. And most all the people were still in the stands talking about the match. They didn't want to leave. They just said, you know, they were just saying what a wonderful match it was.
They realized immediately that it was one of the great matches played in the history of tennis.
Well, that's what the experts have said. Bill Tilden was there. He coached the German team, as a matter of fact.
Oh, really?
And yes, and Bill said later on, he said, no person, living or dead, could have beaten either one of those fellows today, which was quite a compliment coming from him.
Coming from him, that's
he certainly
true.
knew the game.
That's right. That's those are the kind of compliments you appreciate the most from the real connoisseur.
But one of the humorous sides to this match was Paul Lucas, the movie actor, was a friend of Gene Mako, my doubles partner and mine, and he ate meals at our training table. He was over in England doing a movie at the time. So on the day before, the day of the final match, he said, Don, do you think you can get tickets for 2 of my American friends? And I said, let me find out. I think so, but so I called him back and said, yes, I can. And I said, do I happen to know who they are? And he said, well, one is Jack Benny, and the other is Ed Sullivan.
Oh my goodness,
the
right.
newspaper writer and had the successful television show.
Right.
So during the match, unbeknownst to me, when Cram got to 4-1 in the 5th set, Tilden, who was coaching the German team, turned around to Henkel, who was sitting right behind Sullivan and Jack Benny, and gave the victory sign. Now Jack Benny, Ed Sullivan, who got his fighting Irish temper, said, "You so and so, Bill," and he tried to climb over a few rolls. He wanted to fight Tilden and punch him in the nose. And
that's great.
Benny and Lucas held him back.
Restrained him right there.
Restrained him, and so now the match is over. And finally, when I won it, Jack Benny came back into the locker room and said, in a very lukewarm, warm way, he said, "Don, thanks for the tickets. Nice match. Good work," and so on. Like, "Well, this is a nice cup of coffee." And
Right.
Nothing exceptional happened. So 3 months later, I'm playing in the Pacific Southwest tournament in LA. And I've just finished a match, and Jack Benny came into the locker room. He said, "Don," he said, "gosh, what a great match that was." And he was eulogizing, and he was saying, "Oh boy," he said. I said, "Jack, I was kind of surprised because after the match was over, you were kind of lukewarm about it. You thanked me for the tickets, but you didn't seem to think anything was exceptional about it." He said, "Don, that was the first tennis match I ever saw." He said, "I thought they were all like that."
Oh my
But he said,
goodness.
"Since then, I've seen a lot of matches, and they were terrible like a match. And congratulations." So
What a marvelous
that was
story.
the end of that one.
Really, that is so terrific. Well, Don, when I grew up, your name was always in doubles, linked with Gene Mako as he's not the
And
greatest.
Alice Marble and mixed doubles.
Right, and that's Marble and mixed doubles. And it was sort of like ham and eggs is hearing Budge and Mako. And one of your frequent victims in doubles was my brother Ramsey, and he has described some of the drubbings that you all used to mete out to your opponents. But I wonder if you could. I'd like to talk about your Davis Cup doubles play also, but also maybe preliminarily you could tell me a little bit about what you thought made you and Mako such a great team.
Well, first of all, I didn't know anything about doubles when Mako and I started to play, because he had played with Ellsworth Vines and Lester Stopen and a lot of the great players in California, and I had no experience in doubles. I was a babe in the woods as far as. But Gene somehow thought he saw something in me that he would like to start a partnership with. So Gene, the first time we walked out in the court was in Chicago. We played on the national clay courts. And Gene said, "Don, I want you to play over here." He pointed to the deuce court. He said, "I don't care what you do, but don't miss the ball." What he meant was, don't try to do too much.
Right.
Keep the ball in play, and I'll be the quarterback of the team. And he was. So that started me off in doubles, and finally I got the drift of the game. And then one night at Newport, when we were playing in the tournament there, I said, "Gene, I wonder what would happen if when they're serving to you, I stood in on the first serve. Now, the first serve, everyone stays back, and if they miss the first serve, then the other guy goes in on the second one."
Right.
He said, "Well, I don't know." He said, "Should we try it tomorrow?" I said, "Why don't we?" Because I said, we both can return serve reasonably well, and if I'm up there in the first serve and they get it in and you returned it, now they don't have as much room to hit the ball into the court because I'm up at the net already. So it so happened that Gene returned his first serve well. I was up the net, and if they didn't hit the ball past me, and I moved over and I knocked the volley between them. So when they served to me, Mako was up the net, I made a good return, and he moved over and poached and knocked the volley between them. So we started, and everyone looked at us like, what the hell's going on here?
Right.
So we kept doing that, and finally one year, we beat Allison and Van Ryn, who were the world's doubles champions for a number of years. We beat them 14 times in 1 year.
Oh my goodness.
So I think we were the first person to stand in on the first serve in doubles.
Right.
So since then, now most everyone does it, but now you see variations of it. But
Right.
I think that was one of our reasons for success, plus the fact that we could return serve pretty well.
Right. Now, do you have any particular memories about doubles play in Davis Cup with your partner Mako?
I sure do. In that same tie with Germany, the doubles was a key match, as it turned out. I had missed a few overheads, and Gene had a great overhead. And I said, "Gene, I don't really feel comfortable on the lobs that I've been mishitting or whatever." I said, "If you can take the lob that's between us, or that's for me or for either one of us, you holler mine and I'll get out of the way and you handle it." So he said, okay. So a lob would go up, and finally, if Gene thought he could handle it, he'd say, mine. So I moved out of the way, and Gene knocked off the overheads, and he really won that match because not only of his good play, I was playing all right, except I had missed a few overheads, but his taking it overheads won the match for us.
Right.
So that was very important.
Great. Well, we hit the highlight of probably the greatest Davis Cup match played. Do you have some other memories that you'd like to share with us about your participation in Davis Cup? Either some of the other players on the American team, or some of the opponents, or?
Well, one of my regrets in tennis is, it doesn't answer your question, but I would have liked to have tried to win the Grand Slam in doubles as well as singles. But we got to the finals of all four, but won two and lost two. But that wasn't to be. So, but one Davis Cup match, we were playing England. I was playing Fred Perry in the Davis Cup match, and it was nip and tuck at this point. Fred was the best player in the world at that time, and he was expected to win, but I was running him close. And I threw up a bad lob when Fred was at the net. I never was a good lobber like Bobby Riggs or Ken Rosewall or some of those fellows. But Fred was about ready to smash it, and a piece of paper filtered down right in front of him. And Fred watched it come down. Now, he didn't hit the ball, and I won the point. He just watched the paper. So he picked up the paper, and all of a sudden he's laughing. He's hitting his leg. He's laughing. So he motioned me to come up to the net. So I came up to the net, and Fred handed me this paper, and he said, there's nothing funny on this, but make out like it's funny. So I picked up the paper, and I started to laugh too. We're both laughing like this. And so I handed the paper back to Fred, and he folded it up, put it in his pocket. He said, you got to promise me you'll never tell anyone that there was nothing funny on this paper. So, of course, up until now, I haven't.
Oh, that's marvelous.
I'll go to Wimbledon now, and there must be 3 or 4 or 5 people that come up to me and say, what was so damn funny on that piece of paper that came filtered down in front of Perry during your Davis Cup match? So I said, well, I promised Fred I wouldn't tell, so I never did. Anyway, that was in a very close point in the match where it could have gone either way.
Right.
You don't forget things like that.
Boy, you sure don't. That's right. Well, I'd never heard that story before, and I'm delighted to have shared that with you. That's wonderful. Are there any other of the players that you competed against that particularly made an impression on you, either as to their particular style of play or just in terms of their sportsmanship or even lack of it?
Well, I didn't know what the game was all about until I was exposed to Fred Perry. When I first went over to England to play at Wimbledon, I had just turned 19, and Fred rushed me all over the court. I could hardly get my breath because he was pushing me back all the time, and I thought, boy, this is a different game than I really realized. So after being exposed to that, I was trying to be ready for him the next time, but he still rushed me more, but not as much as the first time. So after playing against Fred a few times, I realized that I had to take an earlier ball and try to hit the ball maybe a little harder than he did, and maybe I could rush him like he was rushing me. So, but I think Von Cram was the most impressive person I ever met. He was fantastic. My 2 heroes in tennis earlier were Fred and Ellsworth Vines.
Right.
They were great players. And later on, Jack Kramer, who was a marvelous sport. And there are quite a number of good sports. Bunny Austin was a perfect sport. Gosh, I beat him 6-1, 6-11, 6-3 in the finals of Wimbledon, and we shook hands. And Bunny said, Don, that was without a doubt one of the best matches I've ever played. Now, he only won 4 games, and he said it was one of the best matches.
Right.
So when I saw the statistics, he only made 4 more errors than I did.
Good heavens.
But I made about 25 or 30 more placements than he did.
Right.
So he really played well, but
he didn't give it to you at all.
No,
it was you had to earn every point.
Making more placements than he did. But he didn't play badly. He thought he played very well. I thought he was just trying to be a good sport. But when I saw the statistics, I knew what he was talking about.
Right. That is impressive.
But Cram, to me, was one of the most impressive men I've ever met.
Well, I've always heard that he paid a pretty dear price for not being a Nazi once the war started, that he was imprisoned, I think, during World War II.
But yes, he never, he was a good friend of Hermann Goering's. And Goering called Cram in 5 different times to ask him to join the Nazi Party, and Gottfried said, Herman, I can't join the Nazi Party because the Nazis are doing this, this, and this. I think they ought to do this, this, and this. So finally, Goering called him in on the 6th time. He said, Gottfried, we want you to join the Nazi Party. So Gottfried said, not again, Herman. He said, before you say no, I want you to look at something. So he opened a drawer and pulled out a folder and handed it to Gottfried. And Gottfried opened it up. Now the Cram family owned 6 castles or farms, but they were castles in the area of Hanover, Germany.
Right.
And Gottfried says, "Why, these are the mortgage notes." This was now during the war. The mortgage notes on our castles, and the mortgage notes were held by Jewish banks. So he handed the folder back to Goering, and Goering tore them up, threw them in the wastebasket. He said, "You're now free and clear. You owe nothing on these bonds."
Good heavens.
And Gottfried said, "Herman, if this is the way the Nazis do business, it'll never get made." He said, "I'll honor those notes when the war is over, if I'm still alive and if I can." And that's when they put him in the Russian front as a buck private in the army when he had a reserve commission. And that's when they were fighting a rear guard in Stalingrad. The dead of winter, freezing weather. Now Gottfried was in a group of 200, a platoon of 200. They had 1 machine gun and a certain amount of ammunition. So Gottfried said, "Look, we're all going to be killed, so I'll hold off the Russians as long as I can, as long as the ammunition holds out." And he drew a map. He said, "Here's how you get back to the German line, so no use all of us dying." So he expended all of his ammunition. Freezing, he had the heel frozen on one of his feet, I can't remember which one. He staggered back to the German lines. The German general knew nothing about Cram, why he was in the army, awarded him the Iron Cross for bravery, and they discharged him because he had the heel frozen on one of his feet. And so that's how his stint in the army ended.
Right.
And here they put him in to humiliate him, and he wound up a hero.
Wow, what a story.
The one other story about Cram that he told us about when we saw him after the war was, he said, "Don," he said, "I was walking across the field one day in my English bowler hat and my umbrella, and I was walking across the field to our place, and he said, I saw 2 German soldiers had a captured American pilot, and he was bleeding. He was obviously hurt because he had to bail out of the plane. So he stopped the soldiers. He said, I want you to take this man to the first aid station, which is over the hill and around the dale or whatever it was." And so the pilot said, "Why are you doing this?" And Gottfried said, "You're an American pilot, aren't you?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "Because I played tennis against your American champion, American champion." He said, "You mean Don Budge?" And Gottfried said, "Yes." He said, so the pilot said, "You couldn't by any chance be Gottfried von Cram, could you?" Now this is happening during the war. You'd never dream things like this are happening.
Really?
But anyway, he said yes. He said, "I want to help you. I see you're hurt, and I hope everything goes all right. And these fellows will take you to this first aid station, and good luck to you." He went on his way, but he came over to our house where we're staying in Bad Nauheim. We were playing matches for our military personnel and for the Germans if they wanted to see it. And
this is after the war is over now.
This is after the war is over.
Right.
Gottfried came over to our house to have breakfast. I invited him over the next day because he came out to see us play. We sat down for breakfast at 9 in the morning. Now it's 12:30. We had lunch. We stayed there until 4 o'clock in the afternoon at the breakfast table. And he was telling us about plots to kill Hitler and how he worked with the British intelligence during the war and so on. And it was fascinating. I tell you, we hated to have the day end, you know.
Right.
Anyway, I guess I've talked enough about that.
Well, no, that's really an extraordinary tale about your relationship with one of your toughest competitors, and yet obviously he's someone not only you admire but became one of your closest ever friends.
Yes, he was.
Well, I think that's one of the things that comes out not only at Davis Cup competition but also just playing competitive matches. Quite often in the heat of battle you begin to really appreciate the mettle of your opponent and have that kind of respect which probably you couldn't have forged in any other way.
Well, it was quite exceptional, I must admit. I wish everyone had a relationship or had an idol as I had with Godfrey, because he was certainly that. He was fantastic.
Well, Don, listen, I want to thank you so much for spending time this afternoon sharing your tales about Davis Cup play, and we're really pleased to have this as part of the permanent archive for the U.S. Tennis Association. So this is really a key part of that archive.
Well, I'd like to say one thing in conclusion, and that is the International Tennis Hall of Fame is such an important part of all of us in tennis. I would like to see the young players playing today that are making $8 million every time they go on the court, or seemingly that much, that if they gave a small percentage, which would be tax deductible, to the International Tennis Hall of Fame, because eventually some of them are going to probably be inducted into it.
Right.
I think this would be a great boon, because these kids that are making $3 and $4 or $5 million a year, they could well afford to give 1% or 2%, which would be tax deductible for them.
Right.
And yet they'd be helping an instrument that's trying to do a lot for the betterment of a great game named tennis.
Well, Don, thank you. As a matter of fact, just so you'll be aware, not only would the USTA have a copy of this videotape, but we also intend to send one up to the International Hall of Fame so that they will have it, and we will work with them, hopefully, to develop a videotape that will splice together key parts of your interview and some of the other great players, so that when people go up to visit there in Newport, they can get a sense of the importance of Davis Cup and what a wonderful tradition it is and has been.
Well, I hope they use it, because I gave them a tape when they were celebrating the 50th anniversary of my winning the Grand Slam in England, and Charlton Heston and John Forsythe and Budge Patty and I and my wife did the interview. They've never used it yet, but
For heaven's sake.
I gave the film to them, but maybe someday they'll get off their rear ends and do something about it.
Well, I'll see if I can help out in that endeavor, because they darn well should be.
Jane Brown knows about it, so talk
Good.
to her.
All right. Thank you, Don.